Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this UXDX event. My name is Juan Pablo, Head of Product at Geopagos. Geopagos is an omni-channel payment platform that enables small and middle business to accept credit cards with a minimum simplified setup. With hundreds of thousands users in more than 15 countries across Latin America, Geopagos drives financial inclusion, allowing many underserved businesses to accept payments for the first time. In this talk, I share some thoughts from my experience co-designing products that requires both digital and physical interactions. Starting with the importance of having a holistic approach to the problem you are solving, where the key aspects such as environment, device usability, or even culture makes the difference. And how, as designers, we can empower the team and facilitate collaboration with engineers, QAs, project leaders, you name it, allowing them to be a part of the design process and work towards a common goal. And last, how designers become more valuable when they can cross over specific design tasks and adjust their lens to see a problem as a part of a wider ecosystem. Hopefully, you can get something out of this. Before we start, let me quickly introduce you to the core product of Geopagos and what's the problem we are solving. For many years, accepting payments on Latin America was not for everyone. Many small businesses were underserved by acquirers and were heavily relying on cash. Having your own bulky and expensive POS terminal used to mean a lengthy multi-steps process and signing contracts. You might even need 2 or 3 of these ugly terminals to accept all major card brands. So the MPOS, as we call it, or mobile POS, allows any person to accept card payments anywhere using an affordable, simple card reader device with a mobile phone app. This, combined with a simple sign-up and a rapid device distribution, allow many small businesses and self-employed people to access this service for the very first time in their lives. Additionally, the digital platform unlocks many value-added features beyond payments to manage and grow the business. So the key interaction of a product revolves around the transaction moment, where 2 different users, let's call them merchant and a customer, interact with each other for a certain time in a specific environment and with not 1, but 2 different devices and interfaces. At that time, we were trying a lot of different hardware suppliers to make our MVP and did not have a lot of information on how it worked. Finally, we started to work with a couple of different models, one with the PIN pad or other without it for different zones in Latin America, and I started to try. The basic flow was something like this. From the merchant user perspective, he turns on the device, connects wisely with the application. Once connected, the user must know how to interact with the physical device to read the card in different ways, tapping, inserting, or swiping the card. And then the other important part was to validate the customer identity, either by giving the reader to the customer to enter a PIN number or allowing them to sign on the phone screen with their finger, something very strange at that time. Our first design sprint was focused on the flow and screens needed to interact with the user and the reader. Meanwhile, the engineers worked on a development on how to interact with the device itself and make a transaction safely and according to all the compliance, which was a lot of burden back then. The result was a flow and some key screens of interaction revolving our 3 main actions: power on, connection, and then transaction. This was a very good first step, but we needed a more holistic approach to make a better product. The different devices, the people involved, the place where it takes place, all this constitutes the user experience of that transaction. Very soon we realized that we needed a more wider look and a 360 approach in this particular moment. The digital interaction with the phone and device had to be thought as one unified experience. First, we started to get more into the reader, the hardware, with its interface and particular constraints. The usability and ergonomics, different feedback signals such as light and beats, sounds, button target sizes and icons, small pixelated screen displaying key information. And besides the app screens, there was many things to consider within the user experience. And most of these could be modified by us and designed as a whole experience, not only the screens. And on top of that, remember that for many users, there was their first time accepting payments. Never had to swipe a card into an unknown device or ask a stranger to enter their very secret PIN number on a tiny PIN pad. So a mini tutorial and a clear example of how to do that was something worth considering in later iterations, and so we did. Also, we had customers, users, concerned about the security of this new lightweight reader. So the psychology and the sense of security was very important to consider here now. Initially, we were a small team working at the office. We could talk to each other and show what was processed. But the distance with the user and the natural environment the product was meant to be used was far different. We, in the office, we were sitting in a closed space, comfortable with air conditioning in front of the computer, with all the time in the world to try and make a payment, lay down in our chairs. And also there was no customer user outside. We were thinking more in the merchant, and we weren't seeing all the picture, the whole picture. It was really very far from the real world scenario. It was always that we needed more research and context observation. It was necessary to have a complete picture of that experience. Some members of the team, including myself, tried to visit merchants as mystery shoppers. A few devs and designers showed up in places where we knew the product was active. This would have lunch in restaurants or buy something in a shop to have the excuse to experience the customer side of the transaction. This gave us the first-hand look and what really happened at the point of sale environment, but at the same time, you could not document it and share with others. In fact, none of us really knew how to conduct a research study and gather qualitative data. Next step was to hire a research analyst to help us with the different research techniques and tools we didn't know nothing about. This researcher would plan and conduct research studies, do the recruiting, and also facilitate documentation of their findings. We ended up doing something called contextual inquiries. We didn't know at that time. We know that now. This means that researchers join the user in a natural environment as they conduct their activities the way they normally would. The researcher and a few assistants watch and learn, occasionally documenting with photos and videos. There was also an interview, so the inquirer would ask questions about what the user is doing or other more open-ended. The interview would take on a rhythm of its own, with periods of silent work and periods of discussion, asking questions, and talking about the experience developing in that moment. And where did we go to get that answers? Started to visit different small businesses matching our target audience, retail and groceries, farmers market, and even street fairs. Most used our product, but also did some research on merchants using direct and indirect competitors as payment solutions. So we were looking at the whole experience and not only the use of our product. That was very helpful too, because we could understand more the problem we are solving and not our product in particular. And what all this showed us, this was here there are two insights. For example, we're interested in natural frequency of payments, ranging from a few transactions per hour to multiple successive transactions in the same period, depending on how many employees, time of the day, and type of businesses. This will help us to make better decisions in the connection flow of the app or how long the reader stays in standby mode, and more of this later. Handling the device and ergonomics also was an interesting issue. Many users were the only person taking payments and attending customers. Using two hands and focusing attention in two devices was a bit of a challenge. We didn't know that in the office, for sure. The context was also different from country to country. We need to design for different user, customer regarding card payments, where sometimes the card never leaves the customer hand, and sometimes all the transaction is made exclusive by the merchant. You give your card, and they give it back, like here in my country, Argentina. Now we have more context and deep understanding of the problem we are trying to solve. We can make better decisions and iterate in the product later, or answer those questions we had earlier in the process. For me, it's like flying high above the user's wall. It's some quote I saw reading an article that it's very a nice metaphor here, because you have the moment to look at the problem with a broader perspective from well above and try to see a greater picture. So the designing the experience with others as a whole, but also the transition between touch points, which is very important. And also many times you need to deep dive in a particular problem, technology or interaction, not completely related to design, and work closely with the rest of the team. I think it's very valuable, and the process gets richer. Now, as the company grew more, in addition to mobile app developers who were doing all the job, that part of the apps and the devices, now we have a whole team only specifically for the hardware working on the device. So all the three parts of the team is working together as one, and this brings some new challenges. The design here, the designer and the design process acts as a pivot, unifying the whole experience across different teams. UX, product designers, and devs gathers to discuss flows and interaction as a part of the development process. For example, when discussing Bluetooth technology, low, high energy, you name it, to make a connection faster and more efficient, we discuss why we need permission to turn it on, and how to design best for us this permission, how long we can keep this connection open, trying to maintain a battery consumption balance. So we are linking here the battery efficiency that we're talking now to talk with engineers explaining why the device is set to power off at a certain number of seconds, and why we need to adjust this according to what we saw in our context observation. Remember, natural frequency of payments, so we now have a median time or number of interaction, and how long the device has to be turned on. All this could be changed, and so we could change it, but we needed to discuss it with the team. To change this, we needed to make a new firmware who has to go through an approbation process, and to make that in the device, we needed to develop a new entire flow in the application, which was a firmware update, which is very critical to the core product. So we go back to the digital screen and design again to later iterate in another feature of the product. Ultimately, designers ended up knowing a lot more about development constraints, and developers knowing why we need to adjust user experience based on research insight shared with them. And this is a really great way to go to work, in my opinion. But cross-functional work has some challenge too. In the early days, we were a small team in the office, 10, 15 employees, working in the same office, communicating often and sharing progress. It was very, very easy for us to reach each other. Later, as the company grew up bigger, the team started to rearrange. Different mobile developers started to gather as one big team or even pools. And something similar happened with the hardware engineers. The teams started to distance apart, especially UX and design got quite disconnected from development. I think this is something that happens to all at some point, some time of our companies. The situation led to some misalignment, low quality deliverables, and rework. Engineers were very focused on tasks, high rotation, and low commitment of the with the product. After some rearrangement in teams, the evolution of this, and I think first improvement of the scheme, came with the role of the product or the UX owner, who would align the teams and priorities working across, facilitating communication between stakeholders through meetings, workshops, you name it, with at least one or two members of each team who was involved to share findings and work together and trying to break the so-called silos of work. We also tried different ways to collaborate. Working together, sharing information was a little bit of a challenge. Doing workshops and meetings proved to be more efficient and effective compared to heavy documentation and purely design handoff. So I send you the sketch screens or the Figma screens. No, that was only this didn't work very well. Visual support over written definitions with collaboration tools like Miro, flows, screens, technical stuff, product insight were all mixed and connected in the same visual space. This is very, very good tool for now, for the pandemia also. And as the team works as one, there was no need to detail tasks attached to long user stories. So it was easier and more like natural about flowing of the information. Another thing we did very useful was to also try to include quality assurance people early in the discovery, development, and design process. Many times involved only in the last step of the process. QIs proved to know a lot of the product and give great input and feedback. They were great allies. This also would make the test case process easier because we didn't have to explain what to test or what to look for, because they were already part of the team and they were know what to look at. And later documentation of the features and products is made in collaboration also with Confluence or other platforms like Confluence, trying not to leak critical information and decisions on how to find tasks or user stories. Yeah, you may know like Jira or other project management tools. So for all the QA part, we were working very good together. So another interesting case came up with, we started to develop a new solution commonly known as tap to phone. This was like a new product or opportunity where the card reader is no longer necessary. You can replace it with the same phone. Using the NFC antenna to take contactless payments, tapping physical cards, other phones, or wearables. One of the challenges was to make the proper contact with the card in the back of the phone where the NFC antenna is located. This wasn't consistent across different brands and models. So the first approach here was to involve a couple of QAs to start a test. Each one of us grabbed a couple of phones and tried to make proper reading, tapping the card in the back of different models. They were all Android phones. There's no iPhone here yet. Very soon we discovered that the tap experience was very inconsistent. Some might need to tap on the bottom part of the phone, others in the center, the top. Sometimes you need to make a slight angle with the card, very odd thing to do. So this was validated later with some users and decided to make a little onboarding or tutorial to discover each particular sweet spot of that phone. So you need to make a test payment, moving around the card in the back of the phone to find that place where the antenna is stronger. I really like this particular tap to phone case because two interesting things happened. We were more prepared as a team thanks to the previous experience developing the impulse and researching the context, ecology, and knowing all about the device and the moment of the transaction. And also involving QA testers helped bring more diverse people in the discovery and design processes. They were the one who had the phones and they were used to try different phone models and test them. So this facilitates learning from each other's specific expertise, empowering the whole team as cross-functional one. So involvement makes the team work better and know more each other, have a better communion towards a specific goal. And this also allows us, the designers or the product designers, to cross over most common fields, let's say UX, UI design for digital interfaces, and apply user-centered principles where needed. Being hardware devices, service design, customer support, or a whole new product. This is what I used to say to my colleagues as a little advice, that if you feel any aspect of the product experience is unattended, overlooked, don't hesitate to take a look and involve somehow. Even if it's not what is expected from your job title, this will make you an overall better professional, I assure you. To wrap up, let's say that train a holistic approach before jumping to conclusions and design screens. Take your time to know more about the context, the people, the nature of the tasks they are trying to achieve, and the struggles they have every day. And also be a team player. Try to break the silos around different disciplines and work together towards one goal. Improve as a designer, push yourself as a better professional, go a little deeper and apply the user-centered lens in other areas that at first might not seem related to UX. And that brings us to the end. Thank you very, very much for your time and see you around.